Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
Welcome aboard. We're headed for the world according to Elmer. With hosts Gerry Sorenson and Pat Morrow. Here come our hosts now.
Yeah, here come our hosts now.
Pat, how are you?
Not doing too bad, Gerry. How about yourself?
Good. For those who are not in Northeast Ohio, let me tell you, this is a beautiful day. We've had a gorgeous day from the get-go. It was just freezing cold last night, and I poked my nose out this morning, and I thought, wow. That, of course, got me all excited for the upcoming spring projects here at the Ponderosa. You know, I've got a list that I've been accumulating all through the wintertime here of things that need to be done once the weather breaks. And, things like I've got some coax in the back I need to bury. I've got some antennas that need to go up. We were just talking about the fact that I want to put a 6-meter wire up, hopefully tomorrow, if everything turns out the way that the weatherman says it's going to. And Pat, I know that everybody who is listening to the program tonight has a list of their own. I'm quite sure you've got a thing or two you're going to do now that
the weather is breaking. I want to get done. I want to take and I have a 6BT up. I'm saying I need to get something that's better up on the high or the low end of the band, the 80 and 160. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but I'm going to do something this year. But it's got to be, I want to do a vertical because what I'm wanting to do, the 6BT, I'm wanting to switch that out and use that on HF or on FT8. So that means I'm going to have to switch it out. And I'm just going to get something to put in its place. Not a whole lot of work. There's some stuff up on the roof I got to get done, too. I got a tripod up there. It's about almost 25 years old. So it's time to think about replacing him, too. But I got to get somebody to climb up there to do it.
Oh, you're not going to climb?
Oh, I'm not going to climb anymore. I'm like you. I'm getting too damned old for that crap.
Yeah. Well, look. I've got a doctor's excuse.
Well, I could probably get one if I needed it.
I'm just teasing. Yeah, well, and the other thing that we need to be looking at as we approach spring is I'm sure that all of us in our clubs, Pat is the president of the Cuyahoga Falls Club, and I'm a member of the club down here in Massillon. We've all got people in our clubs that just cannot get up on the roof anymore, or they can't do for themselves outside anymore. So we need to be cognizant of our fellow operators that may, in fact, be in need of our help this springtime. So that's something to consider also.
Yeah.
One of the people that we've been talking about over the last 2 weeks that I want to talk about again briefly before we get into our show tonight is Papa Phil up in Michigan. And, if you were here with us last week, you heard his name. He is a ham operator, and he is in Michigan, and he is in need of a kidney. He is Alpha Bravo 8 PR. Maybe he could do some PR for our program here. But Papa Phil, and he was out with his family a few years back, and they were in a national park, and they were hiking. And he noticed that he was out of breath and wasn't able to get around on the vacation the way that he wanted to. They thought initially it might be his heart, and it was not his heart, which is good. But they did find out, sadly, that it was his kidneys and that his kidneys are failing. And he's within 2 months now of needing to go on dialysis. So he's in end-stage kidney disease right now, and he is in need of a kidney. And they're doing something special. I saw this on our ham radio news through the ARRL. And amateur radio operators, I'm reading around the country, are joining Christian Kudnik, Kosth, and Alexander, and his last name is pronounced Viadaris. Difficult for me to say, but he is W7 Hotel Uniform, and they have a 7-day special event that's going on right now on the bands. And what they're doing is they're highlighting the urgent need that Papa Phil is facing. He does need, the kidney. So they have set up this special event station, Kilo 4 Papa, Alpha, I think it's an E on the end. I'm not sure. But anyway, that stands for Kidney for Phil, they're saying. They're going to be operating on 17, 20, and 40 and 80 meters. And they're going to continue that through March 20th. So
surprising they're doing a wharf band like that.
Yeah.
Most people don't do those.
Well, what they're doing, you can, I guess they've got some special event QSL cards. If you're a QSL card collector like I am, that's a part of the hobby I hope never goes away. They're going to be sending those out. So you might want to listen for them. If you need details on this special event that is going on right now through the 20th, you can go to the QRZ page for Kilo 4 Papa. Kilo 4 Papa. And that will give you all the details of everything that is taking place with Papa Phil. And so we've mentioned him today, and it's time to go ahead and move on. Tonight we're talking about what we were trying to get to last week, but we began last week talking about how a person becomes a ham radio operator, and that took all of our time because that's quite an extensive topic.
Yep.
Tonight we do want to go ahead and move on to antennas. And you've got a famous expression, Pat, and your expression is you can reach the world on what?
100 watts and a wire.
Exactly, and a wire. So when our Elmer, Pat Morrow, talks about a wire, of course, he's talking about an antenna made out of a piece of wire. And tell us a little bit about wire antennas and perhaps a few of the different types of wire antennas and why they're so popular in ham radio, Pat.
I lost my whole train of thought. Back up, reverse. Sorry, Pop.
Wire antennas, different types of wire antennas.
Well,
why they're
the nice thing about a wire is you can run. The biggest thing about it, you can run it horizontally. You can actually, they're really versatile for two reasons. Number one, you can get a fishing lure or fishing like a rock, tie it to one end of it, wing it up into the tree, and you got a vertical antenna.
You do.
On the second side, you can take one end and tie it to a piece of PVC on one end of your yard, run it clear over to the other side with another piece of PVC. You got a horizontal antenna. Now, do you know what the difference between horizontal and vertical is?
This has got to be a trick question.
I wouldn't trick you, Gerry. No way.
What is the difference between a horizontal and a vertical antenna?
The way it's positioned. Oh, never mind. The real difference is if you do some research, most man-made noises are created vertically. So when you take and put an antenna in the vertical plane, you're going to get more man-made noises out of that than you would if the same antenna was sitting horizontally. That's the big reason, and that's why.
I did. Boy, you just pulled that one right out of left field, Pat. I've never heard that before. Most man-made noises are vertical.
Most noises on this planet, anyway, are generated vertically. Don't get me wrong. There are noises that like power lines and stuff like that can be run horizontal. But if you get an insulator issue, like it happens a lot around this area because of the salt mat, that noise is usually vertical, and you can If you want to get out of the noise, you drop from vertical to horizontal, and the chances are probably you can drop sometimes it'll drop 20 or 30 dB.
Wow.
It'll drop 2 or 3 times just by switching from vertical to horizontal.
I can put up a short horizontal wire here, but I'm one of those ham radio operators that is unfortunate enough, I guess, to live in the city. And the lot behind our house here is about 50 by 50. So I can't really put a long wire up, which is why I have 2 vertical antennas. But I can put a short wire up, and I do have a couple of short antennas. But there are certain bands, certain ham radio bands, like 80 meters, or the top band, 160 meters. If you're going to put a wire up for those bands,
you're looking at a
very long wire.
You're looking at about 225 feet if you want to go halfway for a 160. That's a long.
Well, let me calculate that. So I have to talk 4 of my neighbors plus myself into letting me run that antenna down the street. Well, that's probably not going to happen.
Well, then the other thing, too, that you can think of is you can run it diagonally across your property. You can go up above the house, whatever, from one end of the yard to the other. What I did on mine, on most antennas, most of the wires are dipole antennas anyway, or at least a lot of times.
Okay, so there's people listening that don't know what a dipole is.
A dipole is actually an antenna that's in 2 sections that's spliced together or combined in the center. Or a lot of times you can have a longer wire on one side of it. That's called an off-center fed. And then you have a shorter end with the rest of the wire to complete the band, to complete the band spread for the antenna. A lot of the nice thing about a lot of those is you can take that center fed like mine. You can run it. I've got mine. The center and the feed point is actually on my tower, which is on the side of my house.
Yes.
And I've got the longest stretch of the antenna running to a piece of tower over in the other side of the house in the yard, and then I got the other one tied to a tree in the back. That's more or less. I'm running it's an L-shaped. I call it an inverted L, but probably close to what it is. When you put antennas up, you can be a little bit creative with them. You can. There's no telling how well you're going to do. If you put something up and it doesn't work, you just rip it down and change it around a little bit.
That's a big part of ham radio is experimenting.
And the biggest draw to a lot of it, like yourself, a lot of people get into the hobby because you can build antennas like that. Tell me you didn't do that.
You know what? It does matter because people talk about I hear it all the time. People talk about the fact that ham radio is such an expensive hobby. And I disagree with that. I think there are some parts of ham radio that can be expensive, but I'm a firm believer that it's whatever you make of it. You can either go out and you can purchase all the latest and you can purchase the greatest. And of course, the ham radio stores love that. And that is probably where most of ham radio people's stimulus checks have gone. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But
DX Engineering just loves me.
I think all of mine got written on little pieces of paper with DX Engineering, on that one line. And then my signature somewhere on that piece of paper.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
But if you're like me and you're not paid of $1 million, then you can go out and you can buy a used radio, which is how I got started. And that's, of course, my love is tube radios, old radios. But you can go out and you can get a used rig or used radio. Rig is just slang that we use to talk about our radios. And you can put up a piece of wire and you're on the air. So the hobby is only as expensive as you choose to make it.
And as far as purchasing radios, a lot of times you don't have to buy new. A lot of times you can go to when they have them, and they haven't had them about a year, you can go to a ham fest and usually get a pretty good deal on something. You might pay $500 or $600, but it's better than the $1,200 the radio cost to begin with.
Yeah, some of the brand new radios are expensive. They're also hard to come by now. I didn't realize, but I was listening to a couple gentlemen on the radio today talking about some of the issues that radio suppliers are having right now. I did not realize, number one, that a large plant that supplies the chips for the ICOM and the Yaesu radios over in Japan had burnt to the ground.
I had heard that.
Total news to me. I had no clue that had happened.
That was like in February or March of last year, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, and everybody is still suffering because of that plant burning to the ground. And in addition to that, it's just not that, but suppliers, people like MFJ Products and other companies that tend to make gear that is directed at ham radio enthusiasts are having trouble getting parts so that they can manufacture their goods. You know, they can't make an antenna tuner if they can't get the parts to make the tuner, and that's in the situation that they're facing right now.
Plus, on top of that, you throw in a certain COVID issue, and
yes,
the worldwide impact that's had. There was 2 or 3 months that
last week you were talking about how long it took you to get your monitor.
Yep.
Well, that's another contributing factor, is that shipping is taking forever today. Yeah. So there's a lot of factors that have gone into this, but basically it shouldn't hold anybody back. It should just steer them towards purchasing gear from somebody else in the club, maybe, that is selling a piece of gear, or maybe a used piece of gear. So there's radios and there's antennas, and there are things out there to be had. You just may have to be creative as far as sourcing them right now.
Exactly. And the cool part about the hobby, too, is you can get into it. I heard an advertisement for a little 7-inch antenna and a Bofang HT handy talkie for $49 yesterday.
Yeah.
$49 and $49 delivered.
You too can have a radio station on the air for $49.
That's exactly right.
That's how you do it right there. There's plenty of things out there for everybody.
But, you get what you pay for, too.
Of course.
When I first started out, my first radio, my first HF rig was it was a Kenwood that I'd bought from somebody. It was all right for a couple of months, It wasn't anything special or fantastic. I paid a lot of money. I paid $600 for it, and it was probably worth half that. It's about what I got. What year would that have been? What's that?
What year?
That would have been about 2007, I think. That's when I got that one.
That's a lot of money in 2007.
But I ended up, my first contact, because of the antenna that I put up, I had a 17-foot, one of those high gain antennas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was AF 850.
18? AV18?
Yeah, the AV18, that was it. And I put it up and ran some radials off of the roof, or on the roof. My first contact was Nice, Serbia.
Wow. And what was the wattage? 100 watts?
Yeah, it was 100 watts.
100 watts and a vertical.
And it wasn't too. Since then, we do all right with what we've got. I'm not on the roof anymore.
No.
I decided that that was too gaudy, and we had roof problems back in 2011 when the tornadoes and everything, the hail ripped. There was a hailstorm that about ripped the front of my house off.
Wow.
And it dinged up the roof and everything. Well, when we replaced the roof, I said no more. What antenna was up there was I've got a 2 meter 440 antenna up there that I use for the VHF side. And that's the only thing. It's on a tripod. Everything else is on either pipe or on a tower or something like that.
It gives you a lot of freedom when you have a tower, and I've got a tower in the backyard. That's one of the springtime projects, is to see that tower go up. So I'll be enlisting help from the club. If anybody from Massillon is listening in tonight, I'll be in touch. But I do have 2 verticals in the backyard, and we want to talk about verticals tonight. We want to talk about the vertical antennas themselves, and also what is part and parcel to the vertical antenna, which of course are the radials. And there is an enormous amount of misunderstanding that surrounds vertical antennas, and specifically surrounds radials. And Pat mentioned earlier, just a few minutes ago, about the dipole, which is a horizontal antenna, piece of wire, and how it was divided into 2 sections. And the reason that a dipole is divided into 2 sections is one, in essence, carries the positive feed from the radio, the voltage, and the other side is your negative. In other words, it's like a counterpoise. There's a poise and a counterpoise, and that's how a dipole works. Well, the same thing is true of a vertical antenna. The part of the vertical antenna that you see is the element that sticks up vertically in the air a certain number of feet. And you'll find that the vertical antennas on the market vary widely as far as how tall they are. But the part you don't see of the vertical antenna are the radials. And the radials are that part of the vertical antenna that matches the counterpoise or the negative on the wire. And so we're going to talk about radials. How many radials do I need? Where should radials be installed? How long should the radials be? And all of these things that people go back and forth and they argue about all day long. There's actually a science behind this, and there is a way for you to know exactly what type of radials that you should have for your vertical antenna, and their length, and how to set them up. Where do you put them? So we're going to talk about those things right now. Let's start out with a great clip that we have. There's a gentleman, he lives overseas in England. He calls himself the DX Commander, which cracks me up. The Duck Commander, of course, was very popular here in America, so he kind of played off of that, to which I say, well done. And but the DX Commander does market. He markets, like as a side gig, a wonderful antenna. His antenna is fantastic. I've got one sitting in the garage right now, and that is part of the springtime projects that are coming up. But he talks about radials, and so he's going to go ahead and get us started on our program tonight. So let's bring him on, Pat, if you can. And for the folks at home, you're listening to The World According to Elmer. I'm Gerry Sorenson.
And I'm
this
Pat
is
Morrow.
Pat Morrow. He's our Elmer, and we're happy to have you here this evening. So let's take a break for the DX Commander and see what he has to say about radials.
Keep your fingers crossed. Here we go.
Okay, fingers crossed.
Hi, it's Callum again, M0MCX, and welcome to another episode of the DX Commander Fun and Games. Now, this is a DX Commander, by the way. These are all the elements. You can't see very well because you're a bit far away. Well, what I want to talk about today is radials. I get a lot of questions. How many radials do I need? So, in fact, if you Google how many radials do I need, you'll find first, second, or third, I think, will be an article I wrote, which is a combination of my real-world experience of radials and also a fellow called Rudy Sevens, who did a very interesting experiment with radials. But first of all, I want to talk about ON4UN, the low-band DXing book, which basically tells you, unless you're using 120 radials, or maybe 64 on the outside, then you're a numpty and you're not going to get very far, and your whole world will be a disaster. Now, to put it mildly, I think that's a lot of bollocks. Rudy Sevens built a test bed with a single quarter-wave vertical for 40 metres actually. And he started off with no radials at all, just the coax, which he determined as 0 radials. He got a tune because the outside of the coax added as 1 radial, so there's 1 radial. And that was the 0 dB point, if you like. Then what he did, he put in 4, 8, 16, 32 and 64 radials to see, one at a time, and then measured at a particular distance. And he could see the gain relative to the 0 point for 4, 8, 16, 32. Now, for 4 radials, he got a gain of about 1 dB. For 8 radials, he got a gain of about 2, give or take. For 16, I think it was about 2.6. 32 was getting on for 3. The bottom line is, and then it stopped, I think he got something like 0.3 dB gain between 32 and 64. The curve was clearly going to be negligible. The point is, the payback point was, for me, somewhere between 16 and 32 radials. Let's call it 20. Or less. The point being, he's one of the few people who also did an experiment, because when I started doing all this, I thought, I'm going to need all these radials, man. That's really going to sort of get in the way of my experiments. I haven't got time to lay down hundreds of radials, and how much wire am I going to need, for God's sake? So that's why I ship with a DX Commander system, 100 metres of wire, because for the basic 4 elements, we'll use 27 metres of wire. For the other 670 metres that you've got, you could easily put 23 metre, 3.5 metre radials. Why is that enough? Because Rudy did an experiment where he had 16 radials, and he cut them in half. And he measured them again. He didn't cut them in half, probably put 16 different ones on. The point is, he discovered that doubling the amount of the half-size radials was almost the same, and within a whisker of using half as many full-size radials. Okay, so this is a kind of a rule of half, which is why I've got kind of a halfway ground. I connect each radial, 5 of them, into one connector. I'll show you that in a minute down here. One connector, and I use 6 5s of 30. Yeah, so I've got 6 bunches of 5 radials. So what does that actually equate to? That's the equivalent of 16 full-size radials, which is about as good as I'm ever going to get it anyway. So chill out about the number of radials. Well, I started using 4, and I only had 4 radials, and then the next year, when I did the experiment again down by the coast, I went to 8. I thought, it's going to be really good. I'm going to see a real difference. No. Then I went to 32 that weekend, I remember. No. I've only realised now the difference was probably only about a dB, next to nothing. So it's not like you get these inconsequential, huge, unrelated gains to each other. The difference between no radials and 120 radials is only about 3 dB anyway. So chill out, get a few down and enjoy yourself. You can't notice the difference on 1 dB. 3 dB, remember, is half or doubling of power. So it's the equivalent of going 3 dB, which is, you can't even achieve 3 dB regardless of what radials you put down. And that's the equivalent of going from 50 watts to 100. So the chances are, if you go 10 radials and go, I'm going to put another 10 down, you'll never bloody notice it. It's threepence, I promise you. Okay? Here, by the way, is how I do the connectors. These radials here, I put them on a bunch like that, look. I just connect them all together and make it easy on myself. And I put them on wing nuts. This is actually the DX Commander all-bound vertical kit. But it doesn't matter. It could be your home brew thing, whatever. Just enjoy your verticals and have a bit of fun, because they're pretty easy. They don't take up much space. And that's the other thing that ON4UN said. You need just as much space for a vertical as you do as a dipole, because the radials are a quarter of a wavelength along each side. No, they're not. Mine are about 10% of the lowest frequency I operate on. So on 40 metres, I'm looking at about 4 metre radials, and I get on fine. Hell, I've been all around the bloody world the last week on 40 metres in the summer. So don't worry about it. On 100 watts as well. My name's Cal, I'm from DX Commander. Have a lovely day, and more importantly, just have a jolly good time of your RF, will you? All the best now. Cheers and beers.
That
Cheers
really,
and beers. Cheers and beers, Pat.
that really got me thinking here.
Yeah?
I had heard, when I was doing the putting my vertical up. Oh, you got to have 60. You can use 64. You can use 32. And it doesn't matter the size of them, and you need to use 64 for each band that you're going to be on. Well, boy, did this guy just blow all that out of the water.
Well, and he knows what he's talking about. If he did not have the resume to make the statements that he made, then I would be real concerned about the video that he just made that we just showed here on the program. But he has the credentials to back up what he's saying. I have witnessed videos where this man has talked literally around the world, and he has done it in uncut video. And so the man knows from whence he speaks. In other words, this is not steam here. This is real world experience on his part. That's the reason I thought that clip was so important. This guy knows what he's talking about.
And the weird part about some of this stuff too is, even if you go to like the Cushcraft instructions, they'll tell you need to put 20. The ideal thing is to put 24 radials down of so long, and then if you go to the next thing you're going to read, X-Brand's video or X-Brand's instructions going to say you need to put 16 radials for each band that you want to talk on. There is so much misinformation out there. You got to wonder what the actual truth is. Now, taking them for what this guy said with a grain of salt, cutting the radials in half like they did, and not seeing that great of a difference, 1 or 2 dB, that's nothing. And that.
Well, let me ask you a question. He talked about 1 or 2 dB difference. If a person, let's say I get on 80 meters tonight, and I'm talking to my friend down in Missouri that I talk to almost every night, and let's say that I'm a dB less tonight than I was last night. Will he notice any difference whatsoever in Missouri?
He's not going to see that. He's not going to see it.
He won't be able to tell, will he?
Nope.
No. And so there's a lot of misinformation about radials.
The dB is about the width of what? A needle's width? That's hardly nothing. It's not worth playing with.
If there was some great reason to use X number of radials and X number of length, then I think that's something that we as ham radio operators should be more concerned with. But the real world experience does not seem to bear out what...
Now, what he was saying as far as if it increased 3S units, that's 3 times the power, because that's would effectively be 10 dB.
Well, and that's the difference of using some type of radial system and not having anything at all, I think is the point that he was trying to make there. By using radials, you're effectively doubling your power. Well, if you've got a 100-watt radio, that gives you a bit of an advantage because you're just that much more over the noise level, and your likelihood of being heard is going to be better than it would be if you didn't have the radials in the ground. Are you able to bring up the PowerPoint presentation that I sent for you today? Sent for the show?
I didn't see a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, there's a PowerPoint that I put together, and it's unnecessary if we can't show it, but basically what it did, there's a calculator that you can find. In fact, there's not only one, there are several radial calculators that are on the web. And I ran across one today, and it was real good. And that's when I noticed that there was a whole bunch of them out there. But basically, these calculators that are on the internet will allow you to put in the band that you frequently talk on, whichever is your favorite, whether that be 80 meters or 40 meters, or perhaps you're a 20-meter guy, whatever your situation or your circumstance is, and it will give you the ideal length of a radial for that band. And it's really interesting because if you go to 80 meters, according to the calculator, you need this enormously long radial to be able to make a counterpoise for 80 meters. And if you go to 40 meters, it's not so long, but it's still out there, but it's not so long. And so with each band, the length that the computer says that your radial needs to be varies widely. And I guess what I tried to make when I looked at all the different bands, like 10 meters. The radial on 10 meters is very short.
Yeah, it's going to be about what, 8 feet, 10 feet?
9 feet long, right? That's all you need for 10 meters. But 80 meters, this thing, first of all, it wouldn't even fit in my backyard, which is 50 by 50. It would be longer than my backyard to do a radial according to the computer. But what Callum is saying in his video is, take all of the bands that you're going to speak on and just work with what you've got. So if you were to take like 10 meters and you were to take 80 meters and you were to average out, all the different bands that you're on, then you're not going to need this big, enormous radial. And I found in the real world that you can't put it the way the instructions that you were talking about just a second ago say that you should anyway. Because what happens when you go out in the real world? First of all, you put your antenna up in the middle of the yard or as close as you can, but it really never is perfectly centered because there's always real life that gets in the way. So nothing ever looks like a picture in a manual. And so you're putting this one radial in the ground, and as you're walking away from the vertical, all of a sudden you notice there's this large root from the tree that is right. So what do you do then? Do you cut the radial off, or do you go over the top of the root and continue on with your radial? You see what I'm saying? In the real world, it doesn't go like it does on paper.
Well, in the real world, you're if you think burying the radials anyway, in the real world, for a lot of us, that's not an option. And case in point, when I first put my first set of radials down, I was very, very skeptical. I thought I was going to run them over with the lawnmower. The instructions that I got to put them down, I'm thinking, no, you guys are nuts. Well, it turns out that they told me to run the lawnmower and take the lawn just down as far as I could get it without scraping it.
Yeah.
And then take and lay the radial field out and take lawn staples, like fabric staples, and staple them down, staple the radials down. And this is what I did. I took some 80 meter radials, I took 40, and I took 20 and 10 and put them down. Well, coming from the experience side here, when I put those radials down, I actually did staple them down with the fabric staples. Got them so low to the ground that there was no way the blade was going to run them over. Yeah. Now you can look all over my yard and not see any wire.
I have been in your backyard, and you would not know there was a radial there.
I think there's 30 radials back there, 24 or 30, something like that. But I just did it the right way, and I had people telling me left and right, you just do it that way. Don't take and try to bury them things. That's dumb. And to be honest about it, it works just as well. You're still
It does work. It does work just as well.
You're picking up, I'm trying to think, it's almost like a common current from the ground like that, but it's not actually common current because that would buzz. But you're picking up a current out of the ground, and that's what the radials are there for. And there's only so much that you're going to be able to pick up anyway. That's why these radial ideas is, where sometimes it's a great idea, but it's going to have its max. A lot of people say 32 is the max. A lot of people I've talked to say 64. But it's going to max out somewhere, and anything else is overkill. I do agree with that part of that video.
Well, I had first seen radios back in commercial, when I was in the commercial broadcast industry, and all of the AM radio stations that I ever was affiliated with, of course, they have towers, which are vertical antennas in essence, and they all have radials. And so I was exposed to radials from the time that I first went into commercial radio. And these fields that these antennas are located in are very large. And for broadcast stations, the radials are very long. Yeah. And the radials are also bare copper. Now, when I put my two antennas in the backyard, the two verticals that I have a beech nut 10 through 80, and I also have a Hustler, and it's a 6 something TV. Anyway, of course, both of those antennas require radials, and so I did bury mine, but I took the easy way out. This is I shouldn't be admitting this on the program, but what I did is I went to the garage and I got my lawn edger. Don't make fun of me. And I went out in the backyard.
How do you think I bury coax?
I went out with my lawn edger, and I had my string from the vertical, which I took out, and I had a stake at the end of it, so I'd make a nice straight line. This is how anal I am. But I took my lawn edger and I edged a line, and then pushed the wire down inside the and then you just have to walk along then and just kind of tromp on it, and it seals up, and you would never know they're in the ground. I saw the folks at DX Engineering today doing something in their antenna field that's a little bit different. Instead of using a lawn edger like I did, they actually go out with a power washer. Have you seen anybody do this? And they take their power washer and they point it straight down at the dirt, and they literally use the power washer to cut a trench. So where they have these trenches cut, you got this sea of water out there, and it looks to me like they're not going to even be able to get back in there until, a day or two later to be able to go ahead and put the radials down in these trenches. But they actually use water to cut the holes instead of the lawn edger. And what you did, though, works just as well, where you're laying the radials out on the lawn and you're using those staples to hold the radial down, because what will happen then over the course of the fall and the winter and spring, and of course grass begins to grow again, is your radials actually then become part of the thatch.
Exactly. And that's the idea of all of that. As far as the DX Engineering thing, I don't know if you know it or not, but the manager of that place is K3LR, who is a major contester.
I have heard this.
If you go out, he actually lives in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. If you're going out 76, 80, whatever that is out there, just after you cross the Pennsylvania border, if you're going, that would be east, look over to the right-hand side as you cross the border, and you'll see about 11 towers out there, and every one of those is his. He's got a contesting station out there like you've never seen.
How much space do you believe that station takes up? Are we talking a football field?
I think he told me it was 11 acres.
Wow.
There's one tower per acre. It's 13 towers on 11 acres.
That's incredible. Well, he's got way more than a 50 by 50 backyard, doesn't he?
He's got a room of about 50 by 50. That's his contest station. He actually brings people in, well, when there's no COVID, of course. He brings people into contest on weekends.
That is very nice. And you know, and that's another thing he was talking about. He wasn't just talking about the burial of the radials, but in addition to that, he talked about something that I had long wondered about. And I'll just pose this question to you and compare his answer to your answer. But do you see an advantage to putting your coax that runs out to the vertical into some type of a conduit, or do you see an advantage into purchasing a coax like LMR 400 that is direct burial? How would you go about that if you were to start today to put it in vertical up?
The way I do it is the way I've already done it, and that is I buried the. You got to make sure that there's a specification on the coax that says it's direct burial. You can do that. You just you dig your trench with your little lawn thing and stick the stuff down in a hole and off you go. I've found that to be very effective. I put that stuff in there 3 years ago, and there's been no problem with it. I'm running and I want to say it's 9913, but it's not. I don't remember what I've got running back there, but it's I made sure that the specification on the coax said for direct burial, and you do that.
Where do you see that?
It'll be on the specs for the coax online. It'll say it right online. I know DX Engineering has the, and by the way, we're not advertising or anything for DX.
No, it's just the only reason that their name comes up is they were talking about this very thing today, and it fits in with our show.
I'm pretty sure that their advertisements for coax will say direct burial, because I think that's where I saw it when I bought mine. But if you do a for like the LMR 400, if you do a Google search for LMR 400 direct burial, it'll pop it up.
Is there any advantage whatsoever for the guy out there that says, "Oh no, you've got to put that in conduit"? Is there
the only thing doing that in conduit is you don't have to dig your yard up twice if the coax goes bad. That's the only thing. You put a big enough conduit in there to where you can pull it out, and maybe put an extra string or two through it, like most good electricians would do anyway, so that when you do have to take and swap it out, you have another wire there to pull another set through, or if you decide you want to put other coax in there, you put a pull wire through it. But that's the only big. I myself, as far as ham stations, I just want to get the thing up there and get it done. And so, therefore, throwing that coax on the ground, hiding us whatever you need to do, and then burying it for the last 10, 15 feet to the antenna, that's the only thing you need to do.
Yeah. As long as it's not going to get caught in the lawnmower, it's fine with me. I think you would need a pretty incredibly large hole to go ahead and put conduit down. I think one of the things that he brought up about the conduit is he said that he has never seen an installation done with conduit that did not eventually flood. The conduit wound up filling up with water, and that in and of itself, I guess, can create quite a problem.
Well, that's true with any kind of coax, too. If you get a pinch in it or something like that, and it fills with water, every time it rains, you're going to be in a peril. But the thing of it is, the direct burial stuff usually doesn't get dinged, and then when you come to the antenna, they make this stuff that's it's called liquid tape, liquid electrical tape. And what you do when you come to the end of that coax is, if you don't have a connector on it, you can even coat you seal the connector up like that. Or you can take and, like I did with mine, I ended up attaching the coax right to the antenna. I didn't have a connector for it because it was too cheap to buy the plate for it. And so I went directly to the antenna, and I took and got that. It comes in it almost looks like a glue bottle, the little tin bottles they used to have for glue.
Absolutely.
And you take and you just slather that all over the coax, let it dry for a couple of minutes. That's as good as any electrical tape.
Who said that ham radio isn't fun? That sounds like great fun.
Yeah, that you live and learn. Yeah.
Exactly. Let me ask you this, because we're running short on time here. We've only got about 5 minutes left. I don't know where this hour goes. But,
we'll go 10 because we started at 5 after.
Okay. Well, this question comes up. Now, you mentioned earlier that your first vertical was up on the roof. Now, I just talked with a gentleman in Dover who is a member of the Tuscarawas Club down there, and he was telling me that he's preparing to put a vertical up. And I know for a fact that the vertical that he has purchased, that he's putting up, is a vertical that does require radials. And by the way, if you purchase an antenna that says a vertical that says it does not need radials, you're buying a pig in a poke, because every vertical needs a counterpoise of some type. And so my question to you is this: if I'm going to put a vertical up like he's going to on his garage, which is, 1-story roof, what does he do for a counterpoise?
Most times, if you're putting an antenna in the air, most times you can contact the manufacturer and they'll have ground radial kits for the antenna. I've seen, I know that 6BT I've got's got the same thing. If the antenna is in the air, you only need 4 radials. But if you're close to the ground, that's where the issue starts coming in, and you need more than that.
So this begs the question: why the difference? Why do I only need 4 radials in the air versus all these other radials when I'm down on the ground? And what are they? A different type of radial? They're certainly not pieces of wire hanging off of your garage, right?
No, they would be just regular ground radials. I'm not sure what the difference would be. I just know that as far as the stuff when you are working as far as an emergency situation, if people that do these go boxes and all that, and have a vertical antenna, you can actually use a tape measure. You can take 4 tape measures, tape it to use an O-ring or a radiator clamp, and clamp the 4 radials to that, and that works great. You'll see that if you come out to our field day site this year, which we're hoping to be able to do. And right now, at this point, it looks like it's going to happen in some form or another. But you just take and, it doesn't. Radials a lot of times don't necessarily have to be made of copper or anything like that. They can be almost any kind of metal.
Well, that's true, because I know a lot of folks will go out and will purchase aluminum electrical fence wire. And you can go down to a Tractor Supply Company, as an example. You can buy 500 feet of that stuff for $10 or what. It's like the cheapest wire ever made. But there's people that use that for their radials. You don't have to use expensive copper wire.
You can actually go down to your local Harbor Freight and grab 4 of their free tape measures, and there's your radio. I know. Just
make sure they're not plastic tape measures, right?
I know a bunch of people that do that.
When I first started, there was a guy in our club that he came to one of the meetings, and he said, I made one of those tape measure antennas, and he said that the stupid thing doesn't work at all. And one of the club members said, well, tell me how you made it. And he said, I'll show you. And he had it in the trunk of his car. He brought it back in, and he had, you have to, for the type of antenna he was making, which was a Yagi, you had to cut these elements out of the tape measure in different lengths. And then they were put in a certain order. You have your director, and you have, your other elements in a Yagi.
Right.
They were all plastic. He had cut out a plastic tape measure, one of the ones they have at Lowe's, So all of his elements were made out of plastic. I do not recommend that for an antenna.
I don't think that would work. My club did several years back. We actually made a 3-element. We call them DFing antennas, direction finding antennas, but it's a 3-element tape measure beam, and thing works marvelous. You can go out and hunt with the best of them with that thing. It's really directional. We'll have to, one of the topics we're going to have to cover now that we're getting into spring and some of that stuff's going to start happening. I know our club is talking about after the 1st of April doing fox hunts again. And when we do that, we're going to have to go into tape. We'll have to go into a little bit of fox hunting.
That would be a good thing, and that's a fun part of ham radio that a lot of, I think, the younger people, especially the ones that are not involved in a club, they miss out on that kind of thing, and they don't really know what it is, and they've never seen it done. And unless you've had somebody show you, or you've been part of something like that, it's hard to imagine, why do these guys go out and do this thing they call a fox hunt, because it's not really hunting for foxes. So don't anybody out there in radio land be offended. We're not going out and killing any foxes here, but it is something that we should talk about. And since you brought that up, for those that have not been in the hobby long, that are just listening in because maybe they saw this on Facebook or they saw this on the internet, you need to be part of a club. And if you don't have a club that you call a home club, you have no clue what you're missing. Because the groups that you see, whether they be on the internet or whether they be on a social media site, they're not a replacement for the local club. The local club will give you a group of people to be a part of. I have found that radio friends are good friends. I have found that every time that I have needed help with something, some of my club members have always been there to help me out. That's what you get with a local club that you don't get with just a group on a social media site. That stuff is no replacement for the local club. And so I encourage you to be part of the ARRL, which is our group. In essence, it's all of us as ham radio operators banding together to give ourselves clout and to take care of the hobby. But then also, even more so, the local club, because that's where you're going to meet like-minded folks, and you're going to make some friendships that I think will last for the rest of your life. And that's my advertisement, Pat, for the local club.
If I may add a couple of things. Amateur radio itself is a lifetime of learning. A lot of people think, well, I just took and I've passed all 3 of the tests. There's nothing wrong. You have just scratched the surface. In fact, we had a VE session here last Saturday that I sat in on, and I actually worked. We had 4 people there. A little thin because it was because of the weekend and whatever. But we passed 4 people. We had 2 people get their license. That's
awesome.
There was another guy that went from general to extra, and there was another one that went from tech to general. So, we passed 4 people. And the one was saying, now that I got this, how am I going to... I told him, I said, you have just scratched the surface. And I took my nail and went like that. I said, and that's the kind of effect you had.
Yeah.
And what I said, ham radio is a learning experience. Even I learn. I've been in the hobby for almost 30 years, and I still learn stuff. In fact, June 1st, I gotta go turn that form in. June 1st, I'll be in the hobby for 30 years.
Well, you know what? The 20th of March is my anniversary. It's my ham radio birthday, if you will. And so that's a day that you tend to keep track of as time goes on. But people will pose a question on the internet. Well, what about this or what about that? And 30 different guys will chime in, and each person that chimes in will have a different explanation and will contradict the other 29 people before him, and they all said something different in their own right. And again, that's the thing that you don't get on a social media site or on the internet that you get in the real club, because in a real club, you can go to somebody that is more experienced than you, and you can say, here's the problem I'm facing. How do I get past this problem? And they will actually put, their hands on the problem with you and demonstrate to you
exactly right.
how you can go ahead and move past that. And you can, and when you walk away from that relationship and that experience, you then have more knowledge up here than you had before the whole thing started. And you're certain that the knowledge works because you've seen it work. And so it's easy to give somebody advice, but it's very easy to give somebody bad advice on the internet where you don't ever have to face them again and you don't have to see how it all came out. But when you're with your local club and you're there with your Elmer, that person doesn't just preach at you or tell you do this or do that, or, if you do this, this will happen. They'll actually put their hands on the situation with you and demonstrate to you how it's done.
And tell you why it has to be a certain way.
Well, that's another thing. It's one thing to memorize test questions. It's another thing entirely to know the theory and the science behind why all this magic works.
Exactly. And that's the fun of it. It's
been a great week. I'm glad we had this time tonight.
We actually had a video played and everything. I'm impressed.
Yeah, everything worked this week. It's all good.
We even got an intro and an outro.
Hey, we're becoming big time, aren't we?
Oh, we dug on right. Nothing but the best.
Well, Pat, it's good to be with you this week. The show is called The World According to Elmer, and Pat is our Elmer, and we just enjoy spending time with you, and I'm so thankful that we have this outlet to discuss ham radio. Be with us next week. We're on every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock right here on Crooked River Radio, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week and seeing you also, Pat.
Yeah, well, I should be here.
It's all good.
Have a good week, Jerry.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening.
73, everybody.
Media production.